Lars Tallert, welcome to Climate Swings. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So, could you just start with a brief self-introduction, a little high level about your career to this point, and a brief introduction about what you're doing now?
Well, I'll try to be as brief as possible. But the thing is, I've done so many things, and I'm not sure I can call it a career, but I give it my best. I actually started out as a classic violinist long time ago. But then I realized that I was better at journalism than playing the violin. So I've dedicated most of my life to journalism and communication in different ways. Um, so I was for many years a journalist and editor working for leading Swedish media. Uh, but then I started to somehow experience that just reporting on things was not enough. I wanted to influence. So I started to work as an advisor, and I did that for many years, I don't know, like 15 years, working as an advisor to governments, to UN agencies, to media companies, and uh, yeah, different entities. I work for the Swedish Prime Minister's office, the Guardian, the Swedish Development Agency, OECD, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, the regional Kurdish government, and for 3 years I was stationed in Nicaragua, where I worked as a reporter and as an advisor to the Nicaraguan Center for Human Rights. So it's not kind of a straight career, but I've been doing a lot of different things. So about let's see, 13 years ago, I focused on media development, and I led the development of the For You Media Institute, which is the leading Swedish media institute for media development. And uh, in for about, what is it, 4 or 5 years ago, we were a bunch of editors and journalists and researchers who kind of thought, why do we always talk about journalism in relation to freedom of expression? Why don't we talk about journalism's relation to sustainable societies? So we founded an organization called the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. That's an NGO, an international NGO. Today we have members in 70 countries, researchers, educators, editors, uh, senior reporters, students. Everyone is welcome. Everyone who believes it's important to see how to somehow explore the connection between sustainability, sustainable societies, sustainable media organizations, and journalism. So that's in brief what I've been doing for the last 67 years.
A brief 3-minute introduction to 67 years. Well, I think you did a good job there. So there's obviously lots that we could get into at various points at your career because you have done such a collection of different things. But let's go way, way back to that very first swung you made into journalism, because that's really carried you through and been a connective thread throughout many of the things you've done subsequently. So what pulled you specifically, I mean, from classical violin into journalism? That is not a typical swing that you hear about a lot. So if you could go back in time and enlighten us about your thinking at that time.
Well, we are now. If we look where we are in time, it's the 70s, uh, and at that time, you know, people were discussing about a new world order. There was a lot of political discussions. There was a lot of discussions about economic equality. And I'm from Sweden, and there was a lot of things going on in that arena. And I've always been very interested in, how to improve things, how to change things, how to make things better, how to make things differently. And so I guess that is why I turned into journalism, and why then I eventually turned journalism into sustainable journalism. How can you do things differently? How can you somehow influence? Uh, and as a violinist, that is difficult to do. It's
Yeah, as a violinist, you tend to focus on one thing and one thing only, which is playing violin. And I suppose it's somewhat removed from those broader societal trends that you're talking about, whereas journalism is very much plugged right into those trends. But as a journalist, I've worked as a journalist for a good chunk of my career, and there tends to be an inclination where you're supposed to focus on one beat or another. So you're an economics journalist, or you're a society journalist, or this or that. What was there like a thematic pull that tugged you into journalism? You wanted to focus on this topic or that topic specifically?
Well, not really. I can say I'm kind of a late bloomer when it comes to sustainability, an extremely late bloomer, because when I really understood the gravity of the climate emergency, I was plus 60, and and before that, I did a lot of things, just different things that I thought were important at the moment, and I worked with journalism. I thought journalism was important. But then I gradually saw the world is changing, not least with social media. Uh, but not only with social media, also if from a political aspect. I mean, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, where I was active as a reporter, uh, everyone agreed that liberal democracy was the best system. I mean, in the Western world. Now we have a totally different situation. We see that a lot of people oppose liberal democracy as an idea. We also see that a lot of people deny that climate change is actually occurring. So the situation now is very different from what it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I mean, I think you remember the end of the world, Fukuyama's book, when I mean, we really believe that now we have found the perfect system. It's capitalism and neoliberalism, and the market will solve all problems. We don't need to worry. We just consume and be happy. Uh, and, and, and so the world has changed incredibly during the last 25 years. And as I'm old enough, I've experienced that change compared to what the world was like in the 70s and 80s. But journalism has not changed. And the journalism, how to say, the news logic has not changed. And that is a big problem. That is something that, you know, has occupied my mind and thoughts for the last 5 years at least.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Sort of the idea of making journalism fit for purpose for our changing world. But again, just kind of focusing on the retrospective, on your past for a minute, so we can build up to the work you're doing now, and we'll certainly get there. What did you cover in those early days as a journalist, and what were the specific beats you had?
I did a lot of stories, for instance, on the fall of apartheid. So that was a theme for several years, and I was very engaged in the Swedish anti-apartheid movement as head of information of the Swedish anti-apartheid movement. But I also did a lot of jobs for Ericsson, for ABB, for Volvo. I mean, extremely commercial jobs. Uh, so I just, kind of a more of a jack of all trades than specializing into one subject. I think the alarm clock for me when it comes to environment was a story I did in Nicaragua when I lived there at the turn of the century, working for the Center of Human Rights, Nicaraguan Center of Human Rights, and also working as a freelance journalist. I read a small article in a Nicaraguan newspapers about banana workers that were poisoned by nemagon, the herbicide nemagon. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. So I mean, why has no one reported about this? So I found the leader, the union leader who organized the workers, and he organized for me and a brilliant photographer to visit one of the banana plantations. And we went there secretly. We were taken in, and I remember specifically all the banana workers. They kind of lined up, and they told me about their diseases, about their cancers, about the deformations. I met with their deformed children. I saw, young dead young people that died because of the nemagon. We went to the airstrip and we could see the planes taking off, spreading the poison not only over the banana plantations but also over the workers' houses. Uh, and we did a story on this, and it was, uh, I mean, it got tremendous attention in Sweden. It stirred up a debate about organic bananas, which was not a thing. It was very, very difficult to find organic bananas in Sweden at this time, and so this was kind of the start of that movement, and it got a lot of international attention as well, and finally was a court case in the U.S. where these the banana workers. Uh, at least they got attention. I'm not sure they got the kind of the
Remuneration or anything like
thank you,
that. Yeah, yeah, no
remuneration
worries.
they were entitled to, because their suffering was incredible. It was incredible, and that feeling of helplessness when I sat there, like, like a doctor with absolutely no medicine, and I was listening to all these testimonies. I think that story changed my life. Um, but it was only until 20 years later that I really realized the consequence of this.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like your path through journalism had many different flavors, many different colors. You talked about reporting on apartheid, you talked about reporting on commercial and business issues. You obviously talked about this very affecting banana story. Would you say that you felt like journalism was an exciting career that like you wanted to continue, and then other factors got in the way that took you out of being a beat reporter and into a more advisory state? Or was that a conscious decision that you made, that you decided, okay, I don't want to be on the front lines anymore, I kind of want to be a little bit more behind the scenes?
I think there are several explanations. I mean, one is that I like to build things, and I like to organize. I like communities. As a journalist, and especially in that time, you were a lone wolf, against and kind of revealing all kind of injustices and things, and of course that is a good thing, and that is also why I still think journalism is so extremely important in society. Uh, but I also felt that as a reporter, you are a spectator. You don't engage. If you engage, then you're suddenly labeled as an activist. And as you know, if you're labeled as an activist, that's the worst thing you can say to a journalist. You can say that you're a son of a bitch. Well, I don't care. But if you say you're an activist, well, then I get really pissed off. So I had a hard time with that, and I actually had a hard time with that during many, many years, uh, because I wanted to engage, and I felt that just reporting was not enough, and especially as I could see, I mean, when I started to work with scholars and eventually at the Linnaeus University, I realized that if we look at the research around journalism, especially the kind of doom and gloom journalism that we see so much of in climate journalism, it's not effective. Yes, it's telling the truth. That is the truth, but it's not effective. And as I have worked so much with strategic communication, which kind of my other leg, uh, I was upset that there was so much good journalism being published, but it was not effective. And we can see that today, that despite all the good journalism and despite all the good communication work being done, we are not winning. We are losing. We are losing, and there are more and more uh, people that deny climate change. I mean, of course, we can look at the U.S., but not only the U.S. We see it everywhere. We see it everywhere. And so we have to ask ourselves, how can we change journalism, and how can we look differently upon journalism and the function of journalism, and what journalism is about, to be more effective? Because even if we do fantastic stories, if the result is that people get depressed, that they shy away from the issue of climate change, or any kind of sustainability, then we have failed.
So was there a single moment or sort of like a catalyst that set off that spark in you that said, I want to move from beat journalism into a kind of more advisory role?
Well, I would describe it more like climate change. It's a slow, gradual process, and especially um, uh, I think it was very much when I got involved with the anti-apartheid movement, and where I started off as a journalist covering apartheid, and when you cover apartheid and when you see the atrocities of apartheid and the extreme injustices, it's difficult to just, anyway, for me it was very difficult to just, okay, I will just continue reporting on this. I felt that I had to get engaged and do something about it. So I guess that was probably the reason why I then decided to join the anti-apartheid movement. And then from there, I mean, I wish I could say it was a straight line, but I've also been doing a lot of commercial stuff because I thought it was fun. It was not, and of course it was also lucrative. So uh, it's not been a straight line, and it's not been a kind of decisive moment. The only decisive moment I can think of is really, well, the story about the Nicaraguan banana workers, where I really understood the gravity of environmental degradation, and the ruthlessness of these companies. People were dying, and the misery there was is incredible. And it's not like the producer of Nemagon cared. They continued. And it was the same thing with my first visit to South Africa. Uh, I think it just moved me so much that I felt that I can't I can't just be a spectator. I have to do journalism differently somehow, which actually turned into that I became more of an advisor, and maybe you can say an activist as well. I mean, in the anti-apartheid movement. Uh, but then now, when I'm getting a bit older, and I don't care that much about what other people think about me and how they label me. Well, they can label me whatever they want, but I see a need that we need to change the role, the function of journalism, not only to cover uh, corruption and abuse of power, but we also need to empower people. We have to empower people, and especially when it comes to climate change. And we're not doing that. Traditional journalism is not doing that at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, and rest assured, we will get into that changing role of journalism for sure. But I still want to focus just a little bit more on the time that you spent as an advisor, and maybe your time at the Fojo Institute, and just think about kind of what was driving you in terms of the types of jobs that you were interested in working on. I mean, you talked about the commercial things because it was generally fun, but I think the more meaningful stuff for you was probably about these kind of bigger picture things like sustainability and human rights and whatnot. Was it kind of the case that sustainability was like one aspect of the work at the time and then became bigger and bigger? Or how did it kind of snowball into becoming like the main central thesis of your career?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've always been very interested in culture, and I didn't mention I also worked as a marketing manager for at an opera house, the Swedish folk opera, and at the Stockholm Culture Center. So culture is extremely important. I mean, that was also kind of a game changer for me, and to understand how culture can change people. But I think as I have tried to do so many things during my life, and I've done so many things, but somewhere when I was plus 60, as I mentioned, I realized that if it, I mean, if we're not able to build sustainable societies, then everything else is unimportant. That is the one question that rules everything. And unfortunately, it took me a very long time to realize that. But when I realized it, this has been the focus, my total focus for the last 5 years. And of course, climate change is absolutely uh, overarching when we talk about sustainability. If we can not handle climate change and somehow make sure that CO2 emissions are lowering, then we're lost. So it's just the realization that whatever we do, um, this it depends on this. This is by far the most important question in our time, and is also the question that is most politicized and the most difficult thing to report about. So I think that there was a gradual change. I can say during my time at the For You Media Institute, when I worked with media development in specifically in Africa and Asia and Eastern Europe, there we looked a lot at the impact of what we were doing, and we were supporting different kind of media projects, supporting independent media, independent journalism, and we had this big machinery to measure impact. And I guess that is also where I really started to think about, well, what is the impact of journalism, and how do we make journalism that is impactful, that does not only sell, but journalism that give people agency to act. And when you start to think about those things, you realize that we have to do journalism in a different way.
Were you personally involved in the development of that impact machine, as you called it, to assess the outcomes of the journalism in the countries that you were working on?
Well, in a way, of course, there were experts on measuring the impact. But as I was responsible for development, I was very much engaged in this and that. And it's interesting because, I mean, if I go back once again to the 80s and 90s, excuse me for that, when I was a journalist and editor, we never thought about impact. We produced, we published, and we made a lot of money. And we never thought about the audience. We never spoke about, what is our audience? Who cares? I mean, it's we had an information monopoly. We had a news monopoly. So we published, and that is what the information people had. And we also, people trusted journalism, even though journalism was not, I would say actually, much of the journalism today is much better than the journalism in the 80s and 90s, because there are so many different mechanism, not least in social media, that are checking on the quality of journalism. Uh, so the context for journalism has changed dramatically, and of course, if we also see that the business model for media collapsed long time ago, 20 years ago, when Facebook was introduced, basically, and it's been a slippery slope ever since. So journalism is in a different, very, very difficult situation. On the one hand, it's extremely important for any democracy. On the other hand, we can see that the business model has cracked. We can also see that if we talk about climate journalism today, we can see that the typical doom and gloom journalism, everything is going to hell, and the uncertainty journalism, we don't know, but we think that in 30 years there will be a collapse. That's about, if we look at different surveys, it's about 80% of the journalism that is being produced today. It's not effective. I mean, we need to get the truth out, and if you look at history, it's been extremely important to get that information out. But now there's a different situation, because people are just exhausted. They are exhausted, and you can see if you read for instance, the Reuters digital news report, you can see that. Why are they exhausted? One, because it's just too depressing. It's just too much bad news, and I can feel the same. Another report from scientists saying is actually worse than we thought it would be. Second is that people don't trust media, which has to do with the polarization and the politicization of climate journalism. I mean, I talked about being an activist. Today, it's in many countries, it's enough just to write about the climate and you're labeled as an activist. If you're a climate denial, which is in my sense, in a kind of logical sense, that's activism. To deny climate change, that is activism, because it's happening. We know it's happening. If you deny it, then you're an activist. So we need to find new effective ways of doing climate journalism.
So let's get into now the methods and the theory of change and the outcomes that you're hoping to see from the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. Can you just sort of level set for the audience and just describe what is the Sustainable Journalism Partnership and a couple remarks about how it came together?
Well, the things I've been talking about, I'm definitely not alone in thinking like this. There are, and the more that Sustainable Journalism Partnership grow, the more I realize that people all over the world have similar thoughts. So we were a small group of scientists and reporters and editors that thought, well, we need to explore this. We need to explore how can we make sustainable journalism more effective? How can we make journalism that, without losing the independence and the integrity of journalism, how can we make journalism that actually give people agency and give people and empower people? Um, it's not like we have the definite, very clear answer. We have some ideas, but it's very, very difficult to say exactly how this is supposed to be done. The Sustainable Journalism Partnership is an NGO. It's now a global NGO. We have members in 70 countries, and we do reports. We organize conferences, and we recently did an online course together with the Guardian, the Danish Politiken, Norwegian Swedish Schibsted, and the Finnish Sanoma, and a number of universities, where we discuss basically two things. One is, how can journalism better contribute to sustainable societies? The other is, how can the media sector in itself become more sustainable? Because just like any other sector, the media needs to if we look at the operations, we need to be zero emission, just like any other industry. But our product is the most important. Our product is news, and our news affect climate change and sustainability to a very high degree. And if we look at different scientific surveys, it seems like much of the journalism we do has a negative effect. I mean, turning people depressed and or denying, I mean, or just giving up, not taking part of news. We see news avoidance is increasing at an incredible rate. Uh, so this is basically the idea of the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. This is what we do.
So one of the interviews I conducted last year for Climate Swings was with the global editorial director for climate and sustainability and environmental news at the Associated Press. I can put a link to that episode in the show notes. And I asked him similar questions about how they craft their coverage and what they like to what they choose to focus on. And one thing that he said that really stuck with me is that it was really stories about people and people doing things on the ground and their struggles and what they're trying to overcome that seem to be the most effective, that seem to actually create impact and linger in the readers' minds. Is that something that you've seen through your work with the Sustainable Journalism Partnership?
Uh, yes, and we are. I mean, I've listened to several AP representatives talking about this, and it's true. Uh, and there are several things that you can say that, yes, this is an interesting story, and of course, uh, people taking action is incredibly important. And well, I can talk about a little bit about that first, because um, Robert Cialdini, who he coined the phrase social proof, which actually means we do what other people do. It's very simple. And this is very, very basic human behavior. So this means if we are kind of fed with stories, doom and gloom, it's hopeless, about loss and uncertainty, which is about 80% of the news coverage today, uh, we feel that, okay, no one is doing anything, so why should I act? I mean, it's human. That's the way we are as humans. So we have to kind of just realize this is the way we're not better than that. We do what other people do. Um, a study I read a kind of couple of years ago said that is about, we talk about people taking action, you know, it's about 2% of the coverage on climate that is about people taking action. And if we think about this imitation behavior that is kind of inherited in us as human beings, then we have 2% of the total coverage that say, look, here we have some people who are doing things. They're taking action. They are inventing things. They are organizing communities and so on and so forth. And so, yes, absolutely. That is one of the basic conclusions, I would say, that we have to, if there's activism, we have to report about activism. And unfortunately, it's been a bit like this that, um, I mean, one, if we report about climate change, we're already labeled as activists. If we report about climate activism, we're almost in jail. I mean, uh, that is one thing we have to do. And it can be, I remember when I did this project with the Guardian, and one of them, the editors told me, it's like, it could be also, doesn't have to be these fantastic, brilliant people, like Greta Thunberg or something like that. It could be just a quirky researcher who does something, and that has a lot of interest. It's extremely difficult to measure the relationship between what is published and the age, what actually give people agency to act, and what empower people. But I think we can say with some certainty that, based on psychological arguments, that if we publish all the good things that people are doing uh, to somehow stop climate change, that will have an effect. That will have an effect. And on the other hand, um, if there's too much of doom and gloom, that will have an opposite effect. And what we really should avoid is shaming people. Uh, Shaming messages backfire. That we can, all the things that we are going to lose this and don't eat meat and don't do that. It doesn't work. You can say it's absolutely necessary and it's absolutely true, but it doesn't work. What works are positive, uh, reinforcing positive social norms. And you can see that if you look at Trump's campaign. I mean, if you have two messages to choose from. One is climate change is not serious. It's not something we need to think about. We just need to go on with our lives. Drill, baby, drill. It's a wonderful message. It's simple. It's positive. Well, I don't have to change my life. Nobody wants to change their lives. And while our message typically is, we might have a total disaster in 30 years. Negative, and it's uncertain. So uh, yes, stories that are uh, demonstrating people that take action, that do things, are certainly very effective. But I would take it one step further, and because it's another problem with climate journalism, and that is that we address individuals, and we see that individual as a news consumer. And so basically what we do is that we thrust all these terrible news on the shoulders on single individuals, and it doesn't work. So the question is rather, how can we get out of the old, information where we inform consumers, news consumers? That is typically a heritage from radio TV and newspapers? How can we get out of that behavior and start treating people like participants? How can you make journalism that treats people like participants? Well, it's happening, and there are a lot of good examples on that. So I think we need to take it one step further. It's not enough just to say that, yeah, you should do stories about people who take action. It's good to do that, but it's not enough. We have to change the entire ecosystem for journalism and address not only individuals, but to realize that individuals live together with other people and they are part of networks. So for me, it's a combination of strategic communication and journalism. And of course, look at the positive, simple stories.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of climate journalism, even ones that are about people taking action, as you said, it can be very much about the activists and the kind of journey that they're on and the struggles that they have. But at the same time, it tends to set up this kind of adversarial relationship, right? It's the activist against the fossil fuel company, the activist against the big business, the activist against the state, the development, et cetera, et cetera. Do you find that those stories are effective? Like, what do you think about the adversarial nature of climate journalism versus something more uplifting? Because you can imagine where people are just looking at some of these adversarial stories and maybe, oh, that's just a story for the already dialed in. That's just an echo chamber thing. But at the same time, they're potentially important stories. I mean, how do you think about that tension?
Well, but it's very difficult to give a straight answer to that question because, of course, we need to put big oil and big tech and big finance. Uh, we need to hold them to account. I mean, they are responsible. They are responsible, and we cannot shy away from that. But as climate journalism has been so politicized, it's a problem how to approach this. And unfortunately, I mean, I think in most countries we see that we have kind of two camps. One is kind of the conservative camps where you're kind of against abortion, you're against homosexuality, and you're a climate denier, uh, which is kind of absurd. I mean, I can understand that people are against abortion. I'm not, but I can understand that you think this is not
Of
morally correct.
strongly
I
held
can
religious
understand that.
convictions, right?
But
Yeah.
climate change is not a political issue. It's happening. It's happening. So denying climate change, destroying the earth, if we look at it from a Christian perspective, I mean, I cannot think of a bigger sin than destroying God's creation. How can you do that and call yourself a Christian? So somehow climate change have become part of this value package where you are a conservative person and you don't believe in government interference, you believe in the right to carry your gun and so on, and then climate, which has nothing to do with the other values. And this is very unfortunate. And this is very problematic from a communication perspective, of course. And I think we need to be tolerant. I think we need to be tolerant. Yes, I mean, homosexuality. I have a son who's homosexual. I don't have a problem with that. But if I meet someone who doesn't think this is normal or natural, okay, that's his or her opinion. But we can still work together to stop climate change. And how do you make journalism out of that? I think you have to choose your battles. It's I see a lot of journalism that get into that kind of cage where you're supposed to be a certain kind of person, uh, and I think that's extremely dangerous. I think that the conservative, they call the crunchy cons in the US. I think they're interesting. I don't agree with them. I mean, I think it's absolutely absurd that they say that enlightenment kind of destroyed everything. Uh, but I think what they are doing, a lot of things that they are doing is good. So let's see how can we have a dialogue. And I think if we talk about journalism, I think journalism should be more of a and kind of encouraging a deliberative dialogue, because we think of journalism very much still from the information perspective. Our duty as journalists is to inform the people, to give them reliable uh, information so that they can take informed decision. But the world doesn't look like that anymore. It's about creating community. It's about, more than anything else, creating uh, dialogue. And you see a lot of media who is doing that, and that is the way forward, I think.
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of things that are actually going right, what else are you seeing by way of green shoots or promising trends in the sustainable journalism world, or via the work that you're doing?
Well, I'm happy to be born in the Nordic countries, and we have just started a project at the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. We do this on a Nordic basis, together with some of the big media companies, the Politiken and Schibsted. The Guardian is also engaged. We do it with leading universities, scholars, and in the front seat are youth organizations. Um, and we also have private companies and private energy companies that are contributing with their knowledge and also financially. So basically, what we do is, in this project, to sort out two things. As you know, the Nordic countries, we are threatened now. Trump threatens to invade Greenland, and Putin threatens to invade Finland and all of us. So we're kind of a bit worried at the moment, and we have a lot of discussions about how to build an efficient defense. Uh, but if we look at military defense as a risk, we can also see, I mean, that's why we have a defense. There's a risk that there might be a war. But climate change is the same. It's a risk that we calculate. There's a risk that things will get worse because of climate change. So how can we deal with these two risks? How can we talk about these two risks in the same room? And there are a lot of implications around, a lot of similarities and a lot of things you can do when we talk about military defense and where we talk about climate defense, or whatever you want to call it. So it's basically building resilient societal structures. And the positive thing is that it doesn't matter if there's someone from the private sector or a youth organization or from the academy. We all agree on that this is important, and we all kind of have the same agenda, and that is very promising to me. So uh, in the Nordic countries, we see that we don't have. We of course we also have an alt-right party that is kind of climate denial, and but they're not strong. They don't have, the dominant position. So I think this is possibly the way forward, and I'm very curious to see the outcome of this project. And I think I'm very happy also that the media companies are uh, participating, because they are participating as dialogue partners. And we can see especially Politiken in Denmark, and also another Danish media called Zetland. They are very much based on dialogue with their audience. And I think this is the way to improve journalism, and it's a way to build strong alliances and communities to stop climate change.
Yeah, so it's kind of about expanding the definition of climate beyond sort of those echo chamber topics into things like defense and risk and the things that you were talking about to bring more people into this issue, essentially.
It all comes down to, if it's one word that I want to express everything that I believe in, it's community. communities, building communities. I mean, everything from a small friend community, it's a book club, and you decide that, okay, let's not only talk about books, but also talk about the climate, a choir, congregation, really, whatever. There's so many different communities where you have room to talk about climate, and I think that is the most important thing. We have to engage in communities. It could also be global communities, regional, uh, all kind of communities, because the burden is just too big to carry as an individual. And I think I think everyone who is engaged in climate, uh, whatever you call it, climate activism, or is feels this. It's such a strong existential issue. It's impossible to carry that yourself. So you need to engage with people around you, and realize that even though presently we see there's a lot of headwind, we see there's a lot of bad news around, but there, if we look at global global surveys around, do people think that it's important to act against climate change? We see that it's 70% of the world's population, or uh, more or less, that think, yes, politicians are not doing enough. We have to act stronger. And yet we are in a situation where drill baby drill situation. And and that is, I think we cannot just blame other people. We need to look at our own strategies, our own tactics, and how we communicate climate change.
So if I could just keep you for a couple more minutes, I have just a couple more questions that I like to ask all my guests to kind of wrap up the discussion. So the first one is, and I know that, in the early part of our discussion, you really talked about there was no kind of single guiding philosophy or anything that drove you. But if you could just pinpoint anything that you felt like has been a connective thread throughout your career, anything that you felt like has sort of carried you through the different swings that you've made and into the position that you are in now?
Well, I would say two things. Uh, One, I have always been upset with injustice, and I think it's natural. You can see every child is upset with injustice, and somehow we are being taught that we should accept injustice. Mm, I never learned that. So I think it's. I mean, if we talk about climate change, it's extremely unjust what is happening. So that's the one thing, one red thread. The other one is, of course, communication and building communities, which is very much related to communication. The combination of journalism and strategic communication, not to earn more money, but to build strong communities that can be the basis of good, sustainable societies. So building communities, and the wish to build communities, that is something that has grown over the years. And I think finally, when I was plus 60, I realized that this is what it's about. This is what it's about. If we don't build strong communities, we will not be successful. And not really answering your question, but on that theme, I think we must also get rid of the responsibility on our shoulders. One way when I comfort myself when I wake up in the morning and I feel that I give up, I give up. There's no use. It's just too tough. I think, well, I don't have to solve the problem. I don't have to solve the problem. I don't have the answers. I don't, but I know where I stand, and I stand together with my friends, with my family, with my children, with my colleagues, and with all the people that are engaged in the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. And that is what gives me strength. And that is what is important. We need to be kind to ourselves and say, okay, we don't have all the answers, but we see the gravity of climate change, and we know we have to do something about it. We know we have to change a lot in our societies. And that is what is important. So build communities. That is my one and only message to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that sort of feeds into my next question, which was going to be about, given that this is a podcast about climate careers and people who are trying to maybe pivot their career in a more climate focused direction, what's some advice that you might give to them, who are inspired by what you do?
Well, as you know, sustainability has a lot of headwind at the moment. Also, ESG and everything that is related to sustainability. I'm convinced that this will not endure because the facts are with us. Climate change is a fact. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. And it will influence our lives, and more people will be aware of this. Um, so I think that we will get back to sustainability as a concept. Sustainability is a concept that has been terribly abused. But the concept, according to the Brundtland report, the original of sustainability, is that it's threefold. We need environmental sustainability, the that sets the limits of what we can do. We live on an earth that is with limited resources. We need social responsibility. We need to build systems where everyone can have a good life, and we need economic sustainability where we can where the economy is adapted to social and environmental sustainability instead of the other way around. Uh, I the Chinese, they have an interesting perception. They say that uh, it's also threefold. They say that we need to be in harmony with nature, we need to be in harmony with each other, and we need to be in harmony with ourselves, which is inner harmony. And I think that's an interesting approach. So to get back to your question, well, I think that there are a lot of different tracks, as you can hear from my bit philosophical wording. I think that talking about the function of journalism in this case, and talking about the function of activism, is extremely interesting. Engaging philosophers, as they did in a very interesting UK project, that is important. Uh, of course, if we talk about things like uh, sustainability reporting, it's a huge market. It's a huge market. And when I spoke about the Nordic countries, I don't think it's only the Nordic countries, but we see that in the entire EU, sustainability reporting will be mandatory, and to an even greater extent. And there's a incredible lack of people who knows how to do sustainability reporting. I'm talking about Excel reporting, not journalistic reporting. So that's another track that I think is important. Uh, there are so many possibilities, and I think it because it's also, you can also say that maybe it's wrong, but that's how we think about sustainable journalism partnership. That is not, we actually tried first with something that was called climate sensitive journalism. I said, no, it doesn't work because everything is interconnected. We have to have a holistic approach. And you can do sports and be very into climate change. You can do fashion and be into climate change. Uh, you can do celebrities and be into climate change. So I don't think there's like one track, do this, and do that. It's a possibility in whatever you do. There is a possibility to give an angle that is related to sustainability and climate change.
Yeah. And looking back at the various swings you've made in your career, and we talked about all the different diverse positions that you've held and the different kinds of work you've done, is there some advice that you might give to your younger self about the work that you would go into that might help smooth the path or avoid a pitfall that you didn't see coming? Maybe if you could talk to that classical violinist as he was, doing his first reporting story and just tell him, make sure you watch out for this.
Yeah, uh, I think there are just basically two ways to go about, and I have my path has been I done so many things. I've met so many people, a lot of stupid things and a lot of good things. But I have learned a lot, and I think this has given me kind of a holistic view of what is important to do. Uh, but then again, there are other people who choose a very narrow track and become specialists. So I think we need both. I don't want to say that people should follow my path, uh, because I don't even know. I haven't even seen my path. So, but 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 it depends on. We need all kinds of people. We need the specialists. We need the generalists. We need the people that are extremely good at socializing and organizing. We need the tech people, and of course, I didn't mention tech, but of course, tech in relation to sustainability. And if we talk about the whole open source community, that is revolutionary. And so there are a lot of different tracks that you can choose. And I think, of course, what is important is that you have to look at your own capacity, and don't go for the lie that you can do everything, because we can't. We have different skills and different capacities. So what is your capacity, and what is your passion? Because if you don't follow your passion, then I think you will get very tired at some point. And I'm 67 and I'm still not tired, because I always follow my passion. Uh, so that sounds a bit shallow, perhaps, but look at your own capacity, and realize your passion. And then, of course, you have to look at the world. What is the need? What is the need? But I think when we talk about the need of climate change knowledge or climate change uh, attitudes, it's everywhere. It's in every field. It's in every business. In every situation. So I will give a very broad answer to that question.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. And Lars, having talked to you for a while now, I can tell that you feel like you're at the beginning of something really exciting. And you just said you're 67 and you're not tired at all. But as my last question, which I do like to ask all my guests, I'm going to challenge you to cast your mind to the end of your career and maybe just put together a sentence or two about what you would want people to have said. What you'd want your epitaph to be about the causes you care about your contribution to solving climate change, if you could.
Uh, yes, and I have, after having done so many stupid things, I think I have a very clear and very narrow perspective. I want to make climate journalism more effective. That is my passion. That is my passion. I see there's so much good climate journalism that I see, but I see also that a lot of that good climate journalism is not having the intended effect. It doesn't give people agency to act. So I want to explore and find out more about the correlation between climate journalism and empowering people and building sustainable societies. How are those connected? So that is what I will dedicate my upcoming 30 years to.
Excellent. I love the can-do spirit there. That's great. Lars, this was such a rich and interesting conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to appear on Climate Swings. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for having me. And I really enjoyed the discussion.